Joining me from London is writer, broadcaster and presenter Esther Krakue. Esther, these are just such ugly scenes. Take us through how it started and how it's got so out of control.
These scenes that we're seeing are undoubtedly horrific, and the background story or what ignited them is even more so. So, three young children and a dance teacher were fatally stabbed at a dance class, a Taylor Swift-themed dance class in Southport last week. And there were rumors online, some have attributed it to Russian misinformation, that the person who stabbed these young children to death and stabbed 8 others who are still in critical condition in hospital was a Muslim that came across illegally on the small boats from France. Now we have been able to ascertain that the person who committed these atrocities allegedly is a 17-year-old boy and son of Rwandan immigrants. Now, nothing else is known of this person's background. There have been rumors that he suffered from some sort of mental health issue. We don't know anything. But this sort of whipped up a storm and has ignited the kind of sort of community fury that have led to these riots. Now, as you said in your monologue, which was excellent, by the way, there are a lot of these people that are just racist thugs that have nothing better to do, that are just trying to defame and disgrace the memory of these children that were lost by attacking police, by burning cars and throwing rocks through buildings and businesses and mosques. But actually, like you said, there is a second story to this, which is this didn't happen in isolation. How did community relations break down to such an extent that we saw this effectively unrelated from what we know so far issue? And it's because of the decades-long protests by people in this country that are saying, listen, mass immigration is a massive issue. The lack of integration is a massive issue. Multiculturalism has failed. You cannot have people coming into this country without integrating. You cannot have people living parallel lives and effectively being allowed to do so by the liberal elite that have run this country since 1997, basically. I mean, it's quite telling that when Keir Starmer went to lay wreaths to memorialize the deaths of these individuals that were lost at the dance class, there were people saying, shouting at him and heckling him, saying, who's next? If we can't protect our own children, who is next? Now, you couldn't have imagined that happening in 1997 when Tony Blair became prime minister, but it's indicative of how far community relations have broken down. You have communities that are living alongside each other that cannot stand each other. And the unfortunate and uncomfortable reality is we have let too many people into this country that, quite frankly, hate Britain. You didn't see this kind of rhetoric when the Rotherham gangs happened. Actually, when the Rotherham gangs happened, you didn't see any sort of riots. You didn't see, politicians storming out of Westminster, but you did see them storming out of Westminster in some sort of farcical theatre when the Gaza vote happened a few months ago. And people are thinking, you don't care that white working class girls were abused systemically by these grooming gangs in places like Rotherham. You don't care. You didn't storm out of Westminster. Nothing happened. There was no, parade or grand show of anger. But when something like a Gaza vote, which is something that really is happening thousands of miles away from Britain, is happening, they storm out. And people are really getting a sense that the politicians running this country have not only betrayed us time and time again, but they fundamentally hate this country. And they're aiding and abetting people that hate this country. There's so many statistics with regards to policing and crime in this country that makes people feel like Britain is now a lawless place. Across 168 districts in London, areas in London, the Metropolitan Police have not solved one petty crime. That includes car thefts, burglary, in 3 years. You have protests that have been going on in the streets of London for months now that the police have just been letting go on, even though there are hateful chants, there are hateful things going on there. You have Islamist preachers on the streets of this country that are radicalizing people and teaching people how to attack and hate this country, and nothing has been done. And so while this act of vandalism and these riots by these thugs, as you rightly said, is horrible, it didn't happen in a vacuum. And now we have this uncomfortable conversation that we have to have, which is what has happened to this country? What has happened to community relations? How has multiculturalism failed? And how can we bring this country back together? Because I fear that if something doesn't happen, this will only be the beginning.
Brilliantly summed up, Esther. I must say, you mentioned the Rotherham grooming gang, young white girls, sexually abused for years by largely people from an immigrant community, Pakistani, many of them, and covered up by the authorities. And people wondered for years, because they didn't want to seem racist, and people wonder why these mobs aren't trusting the police and the authorities now. And it's interesting that one of the two hotels for illegal immigrants was in Rotherham, the one that got burned. Esther Krakue, thank you so much for your time.